My name is Clara, and I'm 32. I'm sitting in a hospital room holding my daughter Lily's tiny hand. Her breaths are shallow, barely there as machines hum around us. She's fighting, but it's hard. My husband's family stands at the door, their eyes cold, like I'm the one breaking. His mom snaps, "Are you done being dramatic?" I clutch Lily's hand, stitched doll, staying silent. But something inside me stirs. Have you ever held your tongue when you wanted to scream? I'm curious where you're watching from. Like and subscribe to share this journey with me. I woke up to the faint smell of antiseptic and the soft clink of a nurse's cart outside Lily's room. My neck ached from sleeping in the hospital chair, but I didn't care. Lily was still here, her chest rising and falling, even if it was weaker than yesterday. I was Clara, 32, and this was my world now, a small room where hope and fear battled every second. I reached for the coffee cup I'd left on the windowsill, cold now, and took a sip anyway. It was bitter, like the knot in my chest. Nathan had promised his family would come today. He'd said it last night, his voice low as he kissed my forehead before heading home to shower. They'll help Clara. They love Lily. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Lily deserved everyone fighting for her. She was 6, with a rare blood disorder that made her body betray itself. The doctors were trying, but every day felt like borrowing time. I smoothed her blanket, tucking it around her small frame. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, but her fingers still curled around the edge of the sheet like she was holding on. I whispered her favorite story about a brave rabbit who outsmarted a fox, my voice steady, even as my heart raced. She didn't stir, but I kept going, hoping she could hear me somewhere deep inside. The door creaked open, and I looked up expecting Nathan. Instead, it was Marjorie and Harold, his parents. Marjorie's purse was slung over her shoulder, her lips pursed like she'd tasted something sour. Harold trailed behind his eyes, glued to his phone, thumbs tapping away. My stomach tightened, but I forced a smile. "Hey, thanks for coming," I said, standing to hug them. Marjorie barely leaned into it, her arms stiff. "Traffic was awful," she said, stepping back to smooth her jacket. "This place is a maze." Harold grunted, still scrolling, not even looking at Lily. I swallowed the sting and gestured to the chairs. "She's stable today. The doctor said they're adjusting her meds." Marjorie glanced at Lily, then away like it was too much effort. "Kids get sick, Clara. She'll pull through. You don't need to make a big deal out of it." Her words landed like a slap, but I bit my lip, nodding. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overreacting, seeing shadows where there weren't any. I wanted to believe they cared, that they'd sit with me, hold Lily's hand, tell her she was strong. Harold finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. "How much is all this costing? These machines don't run on prayers." My breath caught. I hadn't even thought about bills, not when Lily's life was on the line. "We're managing," I said, my voice smaller than I meant. He shrugged like it was a casual question and went back to his phone. I turned to Lily, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Her warmth grounded me, kept me from snapping. I wanted to scream that this wasn't about money, that their granddaughter was fighting to breathe. But I didn't. I never did with them. They were Nathan's family, and he'd asked me to keep things smooth. "They're old school," he'd said once. "They don't mean it." The door opened again, and Nathan walked in, his hair still damp from his shower. Relief washed over me. "Hey," he said, kissing my cheek before nodding to his parents. "You guys made it." Marjorie sighed, checking her watch. "Barely. I don't know how you stand this place, Clara. It's depressing." I forced a laugh, but it came out wrong sharp. Nathan shot me a look, the kind that said, "Don't start." I looked down at Lily, my fingers tracing the edge of her blanket. I needed her to wake up, to smile, to prove them wrong. I needed them to see her, really see her, not just a problem to be solved. "A nurse?" Sadie poked her head in, her smile warm but tired. "Clara, you want me to grab you another coffee?" she asked. her eyes flicking to Marjorie and Harold like she sensed the tension. "I'm good," I said, grateful for her kindness. She lingered a moment, then left, her footsteps fading down the hall. Marjorie sat crossing her legs and pulled out her phone. "I have a meeting at 3, she said to no one in particular. "This better not take long." My jaw clenched, but I focused on Lily humming softly to her, pretending I hadn't heard. Harold muttered something about hospital food and stepped out, saying he'd find the cafeteria. Nathan sat beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "They're just stressed," he whispered. "Give them time." I nodded, but the knot in my chest tightened. Time was the one thing Lily didn't have, and I wasn't sure his family cared enough to notice. I stared at the empty doorway where Harold had disappeared. My fingers still wrapped around Lily's blanket. The hospital room felt smaller, the air thicker, like it was pressing against my chest. Nathan's hand stayed on my shoulder, but it didn't comfort me anymore. His whispered excuse about his parents' stress echoed in my head, and I wanted to shake him, to ask why he couldn't see what I saw. But I didn't. I just sat there, my eyes on Lily, her small face half hidden by the oxygen mask. Marjorie tapped her phone, her manicured nails clicking against the screen. She let out a sigh loud enough to make me flinch. "Clara, you should eat something," she said without looking up. "You look like you're falling apart." Her tone wasn't kind, more like she was annoyed I wasn't keeping it together for her convenience. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I'm fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Nathan shifted in his chair, his hand slipping away. "Mom's right," he said, glancing at me. "You've been here all night. Let me get you a sandwich or something." I shook my head, my eyes fixed on Lily's monitor, the green line jagged but steady. I didn't want food. I wanted him to sit with me, to talk about Lily, to care as much as I did. But he stood stretching like he was relieved to have a task. As he left, the door clicked shut, leaving me alone with Marjorie. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft beep of Lily's machines. I reached for her favorite book, a worn copy of a story about a girl who tamed a wild horse. I'd read it to her so many times, the pages were soft at the edges. I opened it, hoping to fill the quiet, but Marjorie spoke first. "You know, Clara, this whole thing is a lot," she said, finally setting her phone down. Her eyes flicked to Lily, then back to me, sharp and unyielding. "You're young. You don't get how these situations drag everyone down." My fingers froze on the book, my heart thudding. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. She leaned forward, her voice low like she was sharing a secret. "Hospitals, doctors, all this fuss. It's exhausting. And for what? She's not getting better." The words hit me like a punch, stealing my breath. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to say she didn't mean it. But she just raised an eyebrow like she was daring me to argue. I looked at Lily, her small chest struggling under the weight of her illness. She wasn't a burden. She was my daughter, my light, the girl who'd giggle at fireflies and beg for one more bedtime story. I wanted to scream at Marjorie, to tell her to leave if she couldn't love Lily the way I did. But my voice wouldn't come. It was stuck, tangled in years of keeping peace, of being the good daughter-in-law. The door opened, and Sadie the nurse walked in with a tray of medical supplies. Her eyes darted between me and Marjorie, and I saw a flicker of concern. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. I nodded, though my hands were shaking as I closed the book. Just reading to her, I lied, my voice cracking. Marjorie stood smoothing her skirt. "I need some air," she said, grabbing her purse. "This place is stifling." She didn't look at Lily, didn't touch her, didn't say goodbye. She just walked out, her heels clicking down the hall. I sat there stunned, the book heavy in my lap. Sadie busied herself checking Lily's IV, but her glance lingered on me. Some people don't know how to handle this, she said softly. You're doing enough for both of you. I wanted to believe her, but the doubt was creeping in, cold and sharp. Was I making this harder than it needed to be? Was I clinging to hope that wasn't there? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on Lily's face, her eyelashes dark against her pale skin. I opened the book again, my voice trembling as I started reading about the girl and her horse, the words blurring through tears I wouldn't let fall. Nathan came back holding a wrapped sandwich he set on the table. Mom left? He asked, glancing at the empty chair. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. She had a meeting, I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. He sat unwrapping the sandwich like everything was normal. But it wasn't. I could feel it, the crack widening between us, between me and his family, between the life I thought we had and the one unfolding now. I kept reading to Lily, my voice steadier now, but inside, something was shifting. Marjorie's words, Harold's indifference, Nathan's excuses, they were piling up heavy and sharp. I looked at Lily, her small hand limp in mine, and promised her silently that I'd keep fighting, even if I had to do it alone. But as I turned the page, I overheard Harold's voice outside the door, low and gruff, talking to someone on the phone. It's a mess, he said. She's dragging this out, and it's costing us all. My heart sank, the words cutting deeper than I thought possible. The hospital room was starting to feel like a cage, the walls closing in with every beep of Lily's monitor. I sat by her bed, my fingers tracing the edge of her blanket, trying to anchor myself. It had been 2 weeks since Marjorie's cutting words, and the air between me and Nathan's family had grown heavier, like a storm waiting to break. I was Clara, 32, and I was tired, bone tired, but I couldn't let go. Lily needed me, even if no one else seemed to. Nathan was pacing by the window, his phone buzzing in his pocket. He hadn't sat with Lily all morning, not since his parents showed up again. Marjorie was in the corner, flipping through a magazine, her sighs loud enough to drown out the machines. Harold stood by the door, arms crossed, his face set in a scowl. I kept my eyes on Lily, her small chest barely moving under the weight of her illness. I wanted to scream at them to leave, to stop tainting this space with their indifference, but I bit my tongue like always. Clara, you're hovering, Marjorie said, not looking up from her magazine. Give the girl some space. You're suffocating her. My jaw tightened, but I didn't respond. I smoothed Lily's hair, my touch light like I could pour all my love into that one gesture. She didn't stir, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. I whispered her name, hoping she'd hear me wherever she was. Harold cleared his throat, his voice gruff. We need to talk about this, Clara. All these treatments, these machines, it's not working. You're just prolonging the inevitable. My heart stopped, the room tilting. I looked at him, his eyes cold, like he was discussing a business deal. She's fighting, I said, my voice shaking. The doctors say there's still a chance. He snorted, shaking his head. A chance? You're bankrupting everyone for a chance. We've got lives to live, Clara. Businesses to run. I stared at him, my hands trembling. Bankrupting Lily was their granddaughter, not a line item on a budget. I glanced at Nathan, waiting for him to say something, anything to defend her. But he just looked away, his jaw tight, his phone still buzzing. Marjorie closed her magazine with a snap. Harold's right. This is getting ridiculous. You're dragging us all down with you. Maybe it's time to let her go. The words sliced through me sharp and final. Let her go. My daughter. My Lily, who'd painted my nails blue last summer and laughed until she hiccuped. I felt the anger rising hot and fierce, but I pressed it down, my nails digging into my palms. I turned to Nathan, my voice low. Do you hear them? They're talking about Lily like she's nothing. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Clara, they're just being practical. This is hard on everyone. Practical. The word burned, and I felt something crack inside me. I stood my chair, scraping against the floor, and faced him. Hard on everyone. She's our daughter, Nathan, not a problem to solve. He opened his mouth, but Marjorie cut in, her voice sharp. Don't raise your voice, Clara. You're making a scene. A scene I wanted to laugh, to scream, to tear the magazine from her hands and throw it across the room. But I didn't. I looked at Lily, her small body swallowed by the hospital bed, and the fight drained out of me. I couldn't do this here, not in front of her. Sadie the nurse walked in, her eyes scanning the room like she could feel the tension. She adjusted Lily's IV, her movements calm but deliberate. Clara, you okay? She asked, her voice soft. I nodded, though my throat was tight, my eyes burning. Just tired, I said, sitting back down. Sadie lingered, her glance flicking to Marjorie and Harold like she wanted to say more, but couldn't. Marjorie stood, brushing off her skirt. I have a lunch to get to, she said, checking her watch. This is too much for me today. Harold nodded, already halfway out the door. They didn't look at Lily, didn't say goodbye. They just left their footsteps echoing down the hall. Nathan watched them go, then turned to me, his face a mix of guilt and frustration. They're trying, Clara. You're not making it easy. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Trying. They were abandoning us, abandoning Lily, and he was defending them. I wanted to grab his shoulders to shake him until he saw what I saw, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned back to Lily, my hand on hers, her skin cool against mine. I didn't know how to fight this, not yet, but the anger was building a fire I couldn't ignore. I sat frozen, my hand still on Lily's, her cool skin, the only thing keeping me grounded. Nathan's words hung in the air, sharp and stinging, like he'd slapped me. Trying. They're trying. I wanted to laugh, but my chest was too tight, my breath caught somewhere deep inside. The hospital room felt smaller now, the beeping of Lily's machines louder like a clock ticking down. I was Clara, 32, and I was losing something I couldn't name, not just Lily, but the life I thought I had. Nathan moved to the window, staring out at the parking lot, his shoulders slumped. I waited for him to turn to say he was wrong, that he'd fight for Lily with me, but he didn't. He just stood there, his phone buzzing again, ignored. I looked at Lily, her oxygen mask fogging faintly with each breath, and my heart ached. She deserved better than this, better than us. The door swung open, and I flinched, expecting Marjorie or Harold back to twist the knife. Instead, it was Tabitha, Nathan's sister, her heels clicking as she strode in. Her hair was pulled back tight, her face all sharp angles and judgment. Clara. She said, her voice clipped like my name was an inconvenience. Nathan texted, said you're being difficult again. I stared at her, my mouth dry. Difficult. I was fighting for my daughter's life. She didn't sit, just crossed her arms, her purse dangling from one elbow. Look, I get it. This is hard. But you're not the only one hurting. We're all dealing with this. Her eyes flicked to Lily, then away, like looking too long might burn her. You're making it worse, Clara. Acting like you're the only one who cares. My hands curled into fists, nails biting into my palms. She's my daughter, I said, my voice low, trembling. I'm not acting. She's dying, Tabitha. The words slipped out raw and heavy, and I hated how it sounded like I was giving up. Tabitha's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close enough to make my stomach churn. Exactly, she said. She's dying, so why drag it out? You're torturing her, and us. I felt the room spin, her words sinking in like poison. Torturing her. I looked at Lily, her small body so still, and for a moment I doubted myself. Was I selfish? Was I holding on for me, not her? The thought clawed at me, but I pushed it away, focusing on her hand in mine. Her pulse faint, but there. You don't know her, I whispered. You don't know what she's fighting for. Tabitha rolled her eyes, stepping closer. Oh, please. Spare me the martyr act. You're not some hero, Clara. You're just scared to let go. She leaned in, her voice dropping. Lily's a lost cause. Everyone sees it but you. My breath caught, and I felt something snap inside. Not loud, not yet, but deep, like a crack spreading through glass. Nathan turned from the window, finally looking at us. Tabitha, enough, he said, but his voice was weak, like he didn't mean it. She ignored him, her eyes locked on mine. You're tearing this family apart, she said. Mom and Dad are a wreck because of you. Nathan's a mess. Just stop. I stared at her, then at Nathan, waiting for him to defend me to tell her she was wrong. But he just looked down, his hands in his pockets, silent. The door opened again, and Sadie stepped in, her tray of supplies rattling. She paused, her eyes narrowing as she took in Tabitha's stance, my shaking hands. Clara. I need to check Lily's chart, she said, her voice calm but firm, like she was trying to break the moment. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat burning. Sadie moved to the bed, her presence a small shield, but it wasn't enough. Tabitha straightened, adjusting her purse. I'm done here, she said, glancing at Nathan. Talk to her, Nate. She's out of control. She walked out, her heels echoing, leaving a silence that felt like a bruise. I looked at Nathan, my voice barely a whisper. Is that what you think? That I'm out of control? He sighed, rubbing his face. Clara, I don't know. I just want this to stop hurting. I turned back to Lily, my eyes blurring with tears I wouldn't let fall. Stop hurting? There was no stopping this, not while Lily was fighting, not while I was the only one who seemed to care. I found a crumpled note in her bedding, her shaky handwriting barely legible. I'm sorry, I'm sick. My heart shattered the pieces, sharp and jagged. I clutched the note, my anger boiling over, not at Lily, never at her, but at them, at Nathan, at the world that let this happen. The hospital's critical care unit was a different kind of quiet, the kind that pressed against your skin, heavy and cold. Lily was in a coma now, her small body tethered to machines that hummed like a cruel lullaby. I sat by her bed, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the faint rise of her chest. I was Clara, 32, and I felt like I was drowning, every breath a struggle to keep my head above water. The room's single window showed a gray sky, no stars, no hope. Marjorie and Harold were back standing near the door, their voices low but sharp. Nathan hovered by the foot of Lily's bed, his eyes on the floor, like he couldn't bear to look at her. I'd stopped expecting him to fight for us, but it still hurt, a dull ache that never left. Tabitha wasn't here, but her words from last week lingered, cutting deeper every time I replayed them. Lost cause. The phrase was a blade, and I was bleeding out. Marjorie stepped forward. Her arms crossed her face, a mask of impatience. Clara, this has gone on long enough, she said, her voice like ice. You're not doing her any favors keeping her like this. I looked up, my throat tight, my hands clenching the edge of my chair. Like this? I said, my voice barely steady. She's alive, Marjorie. She's still here. Harold snorted, stepping closer, his shadow falling over the bed. Alive. She's a shell, Clara. You're torturing her, dragging this out. Let her go. She's a burden. The word hit me like a fist, stealing my breath. A burden. My Lily, who'd drawn me pictures of sunflowers and begged for piggyback rides. I stared at him, my heart pounding, waiting for Nathan to say something to tell his father to stop. But Nathan didn't move. He looked at Lily, then at his parents, his face twisting with something I couldn't read. "Clara," he said, his voice low. "Maybe they're right. Maybe we're just holding on for us, not her." The room spun, my vision blurring. I stood my chair, scraping against the floor, my hands shaking. "You don't mean that," I said, my voice cracking. "She's our daughter, Nathan. Our daughter." He looked away, his jaw tight, and that was when I knew. He'd chosen them, his family, over us, over Lily. Marjorie nodded like it was settled. "It's for the best," she said, her tone final. "We'll talk to the doctors. Get this over with." Harold turned to leave, already pulling out his phone like Lily's life was a meeting to cancel. I stood there, frozen, my eyes on Lily's face, her eyelashes still against her cheeks. The machines beeped steady but faint, and I felt something break inside me, something I'd been holding together for too long. I wanted to scream, to grab them, to make them see her, really see her. But my voice was gone, swallowed by the weight of their words, their betrayal. Sadie slipped into the room, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. She moved to Lily's side, checking the monitors, but her glance kept darting to me like she could see the storm inside. "Clara, you need anything?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. I shook my head, my throat burning, unable to speak. She hesitated, then leaned closer, whispering. I heard them. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her, then at Lily, and my knees buckled. I sank back into the chair, my hands covering my face, tears hot against my palms. Marjorie and Harold were already at the door, their backs to us, like they'd washed their hands of her. Nathan followed, pausing just long enough to mutter, "I'll be back," before disappearing with them. The door clicked shut, and the silence was deafening, broken only by the machines and my ragged breaths. I reached for Lily's hand, her fingers limp in mine, and sobbed, the sound raw and broken. I'd failed her. I'd let them walk away, let them call her a burden, let Nathan abandon her. The guilt was a wave pulling me under, and I didn't know how to fight it. I leaned over her bed, my forehead against her arm, whispering, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." The words felt useless, but they were all I had. My sobs echoed in the sterile room, each one tearing through me as I clung to Lily's limp hand. The machines kept their steady rhythm, oblivious to the wreckage around me. I was Clara, 32, and I was shattering piece by piece under the weight of Nathan's betrayal and his family's cruelty. The air felt thick, like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in. Sadie stood by the bed, her hand hovering near my shoulder, but I barely noticed her, lost in the storm inside. The door creaked open, and I looked up, my face wet, expecting Nathan to slink back with excuses. But it was Tabitha, her purse clutched tight, her eyes glinting with something sharp, almost triumphant. She didn't sit, just stood there, her posture screaming judgment. "Clara, you're a mess," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Pull yourself together. This isn't helping anyone." I stared at her, my chest heaving, the words I wanted to scream trapped in my throat. Helping? She hadn't even looked at Lily, hadn't touched her, hadn't cared. I wiped my face, my hands shaking, and forced myself to stand, though my legs felt like they might give out. "Get out," I whispered, my voice raw. "You don't belong here." Tabitha's lips curled a smirk that made my blood boil. "Oh, Clara, don't be so dramatic. You're not the victim here." She stepped closer, her voice lowering, each word a dagger. "You're the one keeping her like this, hooked up to tubes, suffering. You're selfish, Clara. You're doing this for you, not her." My breath caught her words, slicing deeper than anything yet. because they echoed the fear I'd buried, the doubt that gnawed at me in the dark. I looked at Lily, her face so still, and for a split second I wavered, the guilt crashing over me. Was I selfish? Was I hurting her? But then I saw her fingers curled slightly, like she was still holding on, and the fire in me flared, though it wasn't enough to fight back, not yet. "You don't know her," I said, my voice breaking. "You never did." Tabitha laughed, a short, cruel sound. "And you think you're some saint? Look at you falling apart, dragging Nathan down with you." "He's done, Clara. He told me last night he can't do this anymore." My heart stopped, the room tilting. I gripped the bed rail, my knuckles white, trying to process her words. Nathan, done. I'd felt him slipping, but hearing it, knowing he'd confided in her, not me, was a new kind of pain, raw and jagged. Sadie moved closer, her voice firm. "That's enough," she said, stepping between us. "This is Lily's room. Show some respect." Tabitha rolled her eyes, but she didn't leave her gaze locked on me, like she was waiting for me to break completely. I wanted to scream, to shove her out, to make her feel the weight of what she'd said, but I was too raw, too empty. My eyes fell to the floor, where Lily's favorite book lay, knocked off the bed in my earlier collapse, its pages bent. I bent to pick it up, my hands trembling, and found a small drawing tucked inside one Lily had made months ago. A wobbly heart with Mommy written in crayon. The sight of it broke me all over again, a fresh wave of tears spilling over. Tabitha sighed, impatient. "You're pathetic," she said, turning to leave. "Nathan deserves better than this circus." The door swung shut behind her, and the silence was worse than her words, heavy with the truth. I couldn't escape. Sadie knelt beside me, her hand on my arm. "Clara, don't listen to her," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "You're here for Lily. That's what matters." I nodded, but I didn't feel it. I felt hollow, like everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for, was crumbling. I clutched the drawing, my sobs quiet now, but deeper, like they were coming from a place I didn't know I had. Lily's heart, her love, was all I had left, and even that felt like it was slipping away. I sat in the dim light of my new apartment, a cramped one-bedroom I'd rented after leaving Nathan. Lily's drawing, that wobbly heart, was taped to the fridge, the only color in a room full of boxes I hadn't unpacked. I was Clara, 32, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something besides pain, a spark, small but stubborn, flickering in the wreckage of my heart. Lily was still in the hospital, still fighting, and I wasn't going to let her fight alone. Tabitha's words, Nathan's silence, his family's cruelty. They'd broken me, but sitting here staring at that heart, I realized I wasn't done. I couldn't be. Lily deserved more than my tears. I pulled my laptop onto the kitchen table, its screen casting a pale glow. My hands shook as I opened a blank page, the cursor blinking like a challenge. I started typing, not sure where it would lead, just needing to get it out. I wrote about Lily, her laugh, her love for sunflowers, the way she'd hum off key to her favorite songs. I wrote about the hospital, the machines, the way her hand still felt warm in mine. And then I wrote about them. Marjorie's cold stares, Harold's callous words, Tabitha's smirk, Nathan's betrayal. The words poured out raw and unfiltered, each one a brick in a wall. I was building a wall to protect Lily, to protect us. I titled it, For Lily Simple, because that's what it was. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the publish button. What if no one cared? What if they twisted it, called me crazy, like Tabitha had? But then I thought of Lily, her small body battling, and I clicked. The post went live, a quiet rebellion in the middle of the night, my first real fight. I closed the laptop and stood, my legs unsteady but moving. I needed to see her. The hospital was a 20-minute drive, and I grabbed my coat, the keys jangling in my hand. The night air was cool, the city lights blurring as I drove, my mind racing. I'd been silent too long, swallowing their poison, but no more. Lily deserved a mother who fought, not one who crumbled. At the hospital, the critical care unit was hushed, the nurse's station, a soft glow in the dark. Sadie was there checking charts, and she looked up as I walked in. "Clara, you're here late," she said, her eyes searching mine. I nodded, my voice low. Couldn't sleep. Needed to be with her. She smiled, but there was something else in her expression, something careful. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't answer, just walked to Lily's room, my heart pounding. She was there, unchanged, her chest rising faintly under the blanket. I sat beside her, taking her hand, and pulled out my phone. I opened the blog, the post already live, and read it to her, my voice soft but steady. "This is for you," I whispered, my eyes on her face. "I'm done being quiet." Sadie slipped in a cup of coffee in her hand. She set it on the table, then hesitated, pulling something from her pocket, a flash drive. "Clara," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I recorded them. "Marjorie Harold, what they said about Lily. It's all here." My breath caught my hand, closing around the drive. I looked at her stunned, and she nodded. "Use it. For her." I clutched the drive, my mind spinning. This was real proof of their cruelty, a weapon I hadn't expected. I looked at Lily, her small frame so fragile, and felt that spark inside me grow, not a fire yet, but close. I didn't know how I'd use it, not yet, but I knew I would. I'd make them face what they'd done, make them see Lily not as a burden, but as the girl who deserved everything. I leaned closer to Lily, my voice a promise. "I'm here, baby. I'm fighting now." The words felt like a vow, one I'd keep no matter what. The room was quiet, but inside, I was waking up, the weight of my silence lifting, replaced by something stronger, something fierce. The flash drive felt heavy in my palm, like it held more than just a recording. It held the truth, sharp and unyielding. I was Clara, 32, sitting by Lily's hospital bed, the soft beep of her machines, a steady reminder of why I was here. The blog post I'd published hours ago was already out there, my words floating in the world, but this drive was different. It was proof, a way to make Nathan's family face what they'd done. I slipped it into my pocket, my fingers brushing Lily's drawing still tucked there, her wobbly heart grounding me. Morning light crept through the hospital window, pale and thin, but it felt like a beginning. I leaned back in the chair, my eyes on Lily's face, her eyelashes still against her cheeks. I'd been silent for so long, swallowing their venom, but last night's post had cracked something open. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was a fighter, and I was starting with them. I pulled out my phone, the blog's dashboard glowing on the screen. Comments were already trickling in, strangers, mostly leaving messages of hope, prayers for Lily, anger at what I'd shared about Nathan's family. One caught my eye. "You're so strong. Keep going for her." Strong. I didn't feel it, not yet, but the words lit something inside me, a warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. I typed a reply, my fingers steady. "Thank you. This is for Lily." It was small, but it was mine. A step I hadn't taken before. Sadie came in her shift, ending, her eyes tired, but kind. "You didn't sleep," she said, glancing at the empty coffee cup. I shook my head, managing a small smile. "Couldn't. Too much to do." She nodded like she understood, and handed me a card with a name scribbled on it, Tessa, a lawyer who helped families like mine pro bono. "Call her," Sadie said. "She's good, and she'll want to hear that recording." I took the card, my throat tight, and thanked her, the weight of her trust settling over me. Back at the apartment, I sat at the kitchen table, the card and flash drive side by side. I called Tessa, my voice shaky but clear, and told her everything. Lily's illness, Nathan's family, the recording. She listened, her questions sharp but warm, and by the end, she was all in. "We'll start with the recording," she said, "and we'll look into their finances." People like that always have something to hide. I hung up my heart, racing not with fear, but with purpose. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about justice. I opened my laptop again, the blog still up, more comments pouring in. I started a new post, this one bolder, calling out Nathan's family by name, not to shame them, but to hold them accountable. I wrote about Marjorie's dismissal, Harold's greed, Tabitha's cruelty, and Nathan's silence, each word a stone. I was building something solid. I hit publish, my breath catching, knowing there was no going back. The phone rang, Nathan's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, my hands steady now. He'd left me a message. His voice strained. "Clara, what are you doing? That blog, everyone's seeing it. Call me." I didn't. Instead, I stood walking to the fridge where Lily's drawing hung. I traced the heart with my finger, my resolve hardening. He didn't get to dictate this, not anymore. I drove back to the hospital, the city waking up around me, horns and chatter, a distant hum. Lily's room was quiet, the morning nurse adjusting her IV. I sat beside her, pulling out a small photo I'd brought from the apartment Lily at the park, mid-laugh, her hair wild in the wind. I taped it to the bed rail next to her drawing and took her hand. "We're fighting, baby," I whispered. The words felt like a vow, one I'd keep no matter what. The blog was gaining traction, notifications buzzing on my phone, but I ignored them, my focus on Lily. I didn't need the world's approval, just hers. I started reading her a new story, one I'd found in the apartment, about a girl who built a boat to sail through storms. My voice was calm, but inside, I was a tide rising, unstoppable. I looked at her, my eyes steady, and made a silent promise I'd take everything they cared about, not for revenge, but for her. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a sharp contrast to the hospital's antiseptic sting. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap, the flash drive now a memory on Tessa's laptop. I was Clara, 32, and the weight of what I'd started pressed against my chest, not heavy, but steady, like a pulse. Lily was still in the hospital, her condition unchanged, but my blog had shifted. Something turned whispers into a roar I hadn't expected. Tessa stood at the podium, her voice calm, but cutting, laying out the case for divorce and full custody of Lily's medical decisions. Nathan sat across the room, his tie loose, his eyes fixed on the table. Marjorie and Harold weren't here, but their absence felt loud, like they'd already written me off. The judge, a woman with gray streaks in her hair, listened, her pen scratching notes, her face unreadable. Tessa played the recording, Sadie's gift, and the room stilled. Marjorie's voice filled the air, cold and clear. "Let her go. She's a burden." Harold's grunt followed, then Nathan's silence, damning in its emptiness. I didn't look at him, didn't need to. The truth was out, raw and undeniable, and I felt a strange calm, like I'd finally exhaled. The judge's pen paused, her eyes narrowing, and I knew she'd heard it, really heard it. Outside in the hallway, Nathan caught up to me, his face pale. "Clara, that was low," he said, his voice tight. "You didn't have to do that." I stopped, turning to face him, my hands steady now. "I did," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "For Lily." He opened his mouth, then closed it, his eyes dropping to the floor. For the first time, he had no defense, no excuse, and that silence was louder than any argument. Back at the hospital, I sat by Lily's bed, the familiar hum of machines, a backdrop to my thoughts. The blog had exploded, comments flooding in, some angry, some heartbroken, all fuel for the fire I'd lit. A new notification popped up, a message from a journalist named Carter asking to feature Lily's story in a national outlet. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the reply button. This was bigger than I'd planned, but I typed back, agreeing, my heart racing with a mix of fear and resolve. Tessa called later, her voice brisk but warm. "We've got something," she said. "Harold's business records, there's tax fraud, Clara. Big enough to bring him down." I sat on my apartment's worn couch, the phone pressed to my ear, stunned. Fraud. I'd wanted accountability, but this was a wrecking ball aimed at everything Harold valued. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We push," she said. "This is leverage." I hung up, staring at the photo of Lily on my coffee table, her smile frozen from a better day. The blog, the recording now, this it was working, shifting the ground under their feet. But guilt crept in, cold and sharp. Was I going too far? Was this for Lily, or for me? I pushed the thought away, focusing on her face, her strength, but it lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. At the hospital, I found a small package by Lily's bed, sent by a blog reader. A tiny quilt, hand-stitched with bright patches, no note, just a gesture of love. I draped it over her, my fingers lingering on the fabric, and felt my throat tighten. Strangers cared more than her own family, and that truth was both a balm and a wound. I sat, taking her hand, and whispered, "We're not alone, baby." But the words felt fragile, like they might break under the weight of what was coming. The hospital hallway was a blur of white walls and muffled voices as I walked back to Lily's room, the quilt's soft weight tucked under my arm. I was Clara, 32, and the world felt unsteady, like I'd pushed a boulder downhill and couldn't stop it. Tessa's words about Harold's fraud echoed in my head, a victory that didn't feel like one. I'd wanted them to hurt, to feel what they'd done to Lily, but now that it was happening, my chest was tight with something I couldn't name. Inside, Lily lay still, the machines humming their endless song. I sat, smoothing the quilt over her legs, its bright patches catching the dim light. My phone buzzed, Carter's email confirming the feature story set to run next week. Donations were coming in small sums from strangers, enough to cover an experimental treatment. I should have been grateful, but all I felt was pressure, like the world was watching, waiting for me to prove I was enough. Nathan called again, his voicemail quieter this time, almost broken. "Clara, the blog. It's everywhere. Mom's a wreck. Just talk to me." I deleted it, my finger steady, but my heart unsteady. A wreck, Marjorie hadn't shed a tear for Lily, but now she was crumbling because her name was in the open. I looked at Lily, her face unchanged, and felt a cold resolve settle in. They didn't get to play victims. Tessa met me later, her briefcase stuffed with papers. We sat in the hospital cafeteria, the clatter of trays, a distant hum. "Harold's business is done," she said, sliding a document across the table. "The IRS is auditing him. He's losing contracts, investors, everything." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes searched mine like she knew this wasn't just a win. I nodded, staring at the paper, the numbers blurring. Everything. The word felt final, like a door slamming shut. I went back to Lily's room, the document in my bag heavy as a stone. A new nurse was there, checking her chart, her movements quick but gentle. She smiled, saying nothing, and left me alone. I pulled out my phone, the blog's comments now in the hundreds, some calling me brave, others vicious, accusing me of airing dirty laundry. One stood out from a mother who'd lost her son. "You're giving her a voice." I read it twice. My throat tight, and closed the app. Nathan showed up unannounced, his face drawn, his jacket rumpled. He stood in the doorway, not crossing the threshold, like he didn't belong. "Clara," he said, his voice low. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this." I looked at him, really looked, and saw a stranger, not the man I'd married. "You left her," I said, my voice quiet, sharp. You left us." He flinched, his eyes dropping, and said nothing, just turned and walked away, his footsteps fading. I sat my hands on Lily's, the quilt soft under my fingers. The room was silent, but the weight of what I'd done was loud, filling every corner. Harold's empire was crumbling, Nathan was unraveling, and I'd made it happen. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like loss, like I'd traded one kind of pain for another. I looked at Lily, her small frame so fragile, and whispered, "I did this for you." But the words hung in the air unanswered, and I felt empty, like I'd poured everything out and had nothing left. Spring light spilled through the hospital window, soft and warm, painting Lily's room in shades of gold. I sat by her bed, my hands resting on a small notebook I'd started keeping, filled with thoughts I couldn't say out loud. I was Clara, 32, and for the first time in months, I felt a quiet inside me, not peace exactly, but something close, like the hush after a storm. Lily's breathing was steadier today, her fingers twitching faintly, a sign the doctors called promising. The chaos of the last weeks, Nathan's departure, Harold's collapse, the blog's wildfire spread, felt distant now, like a story I'd read about someone else. I'd won the divorce, secured Lily's care, and watched Harold's empire crumble under Tessa's relentless push. But sitting here watching dust motes dance in the sunlight, none of it felt like victory. It felt like survival, and that was enough for now. I opened the notebook, its pages crinkled from late-night scribbling. I'd written about Lily, about the life I wanted for her, but also about me. Clara, not just a mother, but a woman who'd forgotten how to stand tall. I jotted a new line, "I'm learning to breathe again." It was simple, but it felt true, like a step towards something I couldn't yet see. The hospital was different today, brighter with laughter drifting from the children's ward down the hall. I'd organized a craft day inspired by the quilt sent by a stranger, a way to give back to the kids here, to Lily's world. I'd spent yesterday cutting fabric squares, my fingers sore, but my heart full, planning for kids to make their own patches, something to hold on to. It was small, but it mattered, a way to fill this place with life, not just waiting. A knock at the door broke my thoughts. Miles, the janitor who'd shared his own loss months ago, stood there, a shy smile on his face. "Heard about your craft thing," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "Mind if I help?" I blinked, surprised, then nodded. "We'd love that," I said, and he stepped in, setting down a bag of colorful threads he'd brought. We talked as I showed him the fabric piles, his hands steady as he sorted them. He told me about his daughter gone years ago, how he'd found purpose in small acts, like fixing a kid's broken toy or listening to a parent's fears. "You're doing that," he said, glancing at Lily, "making light where it's dark." His words settled over me, not heavy, but real, like a truth I'd been circling. I looked at Lily, her small frame bathed in that golden light, and felt a shift, like a knot loosening. I'd spent so long fighting Nathan, his family, my own doubts, that I'd forgotten how to just be. Miles's presence, quiet and steady, reminded me of something I'd lost, the strength and stillness in showing up without a battle to win. I picked up a fabric square blue like the sky Lily loved, and started stitching a simple star, my fingers clumsy but determined. Miles watched, then joined in his own stitches, uneven but earnest. We worked in silence, the room filled with the soft rustle of thread, and I felt a calm I hadn't known I needed, a moment where the world didn't demand anything from me. I glanced at my notebook, the line about breathing, and added another. "Sometimes healing starts with a single stitch." It wasn't profound, but it was mine, a piece of Clara I was reclaiming. I looked at Lily, her hand still in mine, and whispered, "We're getting there, baby." The words were soft, but they carried a weight, a promise I was starting to believe. The craft day was in full swing, the hospital's activity room alive with kids' chatter and the rustle of fabric. I sat at a table helping a small boy pin a red square to his quilt patch, his grin wide despite the IV in his arm. I was Clara, 32, and this moment, messy, loud, human, felt like a gift, a breath I hadn't taken in too long. Lily was still in her room, her condition holding steady, but I carried her with me always. Miles moved between tables, passing out scissors, his quiet humor easing the kids' nerves. I watched him, grateful for his steadiness, a reminder that kindness didn't need to shout. The notebook in my bag held new lines scribbled this morning. You don't have to win to heal. I'd written it after watching a sparrow outside Lily's window hopping along the sill, unbothered by the world. It stuck with me, that small act of existing, of moving forward. A nurse brought in a tray of juice boxes, and I stepped back, letting the kids dive in. I wandered to the window, the spring air warm through the glass, carrying the scent of blooming lilacs. I thought of Nathan, his last voicemail deleted but not forgotten. I'd seen Tabitha's name in a blog comment, a half-hearted apology I hadn't answered. I didn't need their regret. I needed this kid's laughing fabric piling up a life I was building stitch by stitch. I pulled out my phone, opening the blog one last time. The comments had slowed, but the support lingered, words from strangers who'd become a kind of family. I started a new post, my fingers slow, deliberate. I wrote about the craft day, about finding light in small things, about letting go of anger to make room for hope. I didn't mention Nathan's family, didn't need to. They were a chapter I'd closed, not with a slam, but with a soft click. I hit publish, then slipped the phone away, my heart steady. A girl at the table called me over, holding up her patch, a wobbly sun, yellow and bright. For Lily, she said, shy but proud. I knelt beside her, my throat tight, and helped her sew it on our hands, moving together. The act felt sacred, like a promise to every kid here, to Lily, to myself. Back in Lily's room, I sat, the notebook open on my lap. The craft day had left me tired, but full, like I'd found a piece of myself I'd lost. I wrote one more line. Healing isn't loud, it's just showing up. I looked at Lily, her chest rising gently, and felt a calm settle deep and sure. I didn't need to fight anymore, not like before. I just needed to be here for her, for me. I stood stretching and walked to the window, the lilac scent faint, but there. I thought of my mother, gone years ago, her voice in my head. Keep going, Clara, even when it's hard. I hadn't heard her in a while, but today she was clear, like she'd been waiting for me to listen. I smiled, small but real, and turned back to Lily, ready to sit, to stay, to let the quiet hold us both. Summer had settled over the city, warm and soft, the kind of light that made everything feel possible. I was Clara, 32, sitting on a bench outside Lily's new hospital room, a smaller one now, with a view of a courtyard where flowers bloomed in messy rows. Lily was awake, her voice faint, but there, asking for apple juice this morning, a small miracle I held close. I sipped coffee from a paper cup, the steam curling in the air, and let the moment sink in. My apartment was home now, no longer just a refuge. I'd hung curtains, blue ones Lily would like, and started a routine: coffee at dawn, a walk to the park, then the hospital. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, a rhythm I'd carved out after the storm of the last year. The blog was quiet now, my final post a thank you to the strangers who'd carried us through. I didn't need it anymore, not like before. Lily's recovery was slow, her body still weak, but her eyes were brighter, catching the light when I read to her. We'd started a new book about a girl who planted a garden, her small hands turning pages with care. I'd watch her memorizing the way her lips curved when she liked a line, storing it like treasure. The doctors were cautious but hopeful, and I clung to that, not with desperation, but with a steady trust I'd learned to lean into. I'd found a job part-time at a local bookstore, shelving novels and helping kids pick out stories. It was simple, but it grounded me, gave me a place to be. Clara, not just Lily's mom, or the woman who'd fought a war. The owner, a quiet woman named Ellen, had a way of asking about Lily without pity. Her questions warm, like she knew the weight of hope. I liked that the normalcy of it, the way it reminded me I was still here, still whole. Tessa had called last week, her voice lighter than before. Harold's business was gone, his name tarnished, and Marjorie had retreated silent for once. Nathan was out of the picture, living somewhere new. His apologies left unanswered. I didn't hate him, not anymore. I'd let him go, not for him, but for me, for the space I needed to breathe. It wasn't forgiveness, just release, like setting down a weight I'd carried too long. I walked back to Lily's room, the courtyard flowers nodding in the breeze. She was propped up, a crayon in her hand, sketching a lopsided tree on a pad I'd brought. I sat beside her, my coffee cup warm against my palm, and watched her draw the scratch of crayon, a soft music. "Look, Mommy," she said, pointing to the tree, her voice a whisper, but strong. I smiled, my heart full, and nodded. "It's perfect, baby." The room was ours now, no trace of the chaos that had filled it months ago. I'd brought a small plant, a fern Ellen had given me, and set it on the windowsill, its green leaves catching the sun. It was a small thing, but it felt like a promise, a sign of life taking root. I leaned back, watching Lily's crayon move, and felt a calm I hadn't known I could find, a quiet that wasn't empty, but full. The hospital room glowed with late afternoon sun, casting long shadows across the floor. I was Clara, 32, leaning against the wall, watching Lily nap, her sketchpad tucked under her arm. Her breathing was soft, a rhythm I'd come to trust, each inhale a small victory. I held a letter I'd found in my apartment, one I'd written to myself a year ago during the darkest nights. It was just a few lines scrawled in haste, "Don't forget who you are." I hadn't known then what it meant, but now I was starting to. I folded the letter, slipping it into my pocket, and sat by Lily's bed, my hands still. The fight with Nathan's family, the blog, the courtroom, it all felt like another life, one I'd walked through but left behind. I'd spent so long carrying anger, letting it define me. But here in this quiet room, I saw it for what it was, a weight I didn't need. I wasn't the woman who'd sat silent, nor the one who'd fought with fire. I was just Clara, and that was enough. I thought about the bookstore, the way kids would tug my sleeve asking for a book about dragons or stars. I thought about Ellen's laugh, sharp and warm, and the way she'd slip me an extra coffee when I looked tired. These were my people now, not by blood, but by choice, a family built from small moments, not grand gestures. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and she reached for my hand, her grip weak, but sure. "Stay," she whispered, and I nodded, my heart steady. I'd started writing again, not for the blog, but for us. Short stories, ones I'd read to Lily about a girl who climbed mountains not to conquer them, but to see the view. Each word was a step away, of rebuilding, not just for her, but for me. I wasn't running anymore, not from pain, not from myself. I was here, present, and that was a lesson I hadn't expected. Sometimes, the bravest thing is to stay, to show up, to let life unfold. I looked out the window, the courtyard flowers swaying in the breeze, and realized I'd learned to love the small things, Lily's sleepy smile, the weight of a book in my hands, the sound of my own breath. I'd thought strength was loud, a battle cry, but it was quieter, a choice to keep going, to find joy in the ordinary. That was my freedom, not in winning, but in living fully, despite it all. I stood brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face and felt a peace settle deep and real. We were healing, not because the world had righted itself, but because we'd learned to carry our scars with grace. I whispered to her, "We're okay, baby," and meant it, the words a bridge to the life we were building one day at a time. What's the moment you found your own quiet strength? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments to know what keeps you going. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It helps share Lily's light with others. And if you feel moved, pass it along. Let someone else find a piece of hope. Thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to healing, to finding your way, one small step at a time.